Hello, beautiful people. We got together today to talk about stress management and mental self-care in the dark days of the global pandemic. I saw Tanna just less than a week ago, right? This past weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, we finally joined all the New York City misfits who started organizing parties. We broke down into amazing writers' party with a small bunch of friends on our rooftop.
10 people. We obeyed the limit. 10 people.
Had amazing time. How are you surviving otherwise? Because we still have the quarantine, the pandemic. These things haven't gone anywhere.
I'm actually a bit better because my work closed for the school year on Friday. So now I get to not, that's just that one whole stress off of me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy with that. I'm trying to focus on getting stuff done in the house because even though, other people were like, yeah, I felt like you feel like everyone else is painting their siding and micro organizing their closets. And I feel like, I got so little done, but, you're just surviving and doing work. So I'm trying to focus on other things. And there's a ton of uncertainty about next school year and what's going to happen with our jobs and, layoffs of city employees. So I'm kind of trying to be aware, but not think about it too much. So anyway,
uncertainty.
Well, thank you. How are you?
In the same situation. I was just going to say that uncertainty is probably the main factor of the stress where we've been discussing and survival, because it's this uncertainty and the sense of being out of control on too many fronts of our life that is probably the most awful part of it. I can't say that the whole pandemic situation hit me too hard. I mean, it hit hard financially. My family lost probably half of our regular income. But beyond that, well, the kid is not at school. So I pulled the kid out of school right away into homeschooling. So that was an interesting experience, the whole thing, extremely positive, actually, on many fronts. So the global pandemic, as far as I'm concerned, has silver lining. We left New York City in early May for our place in New Jersey on the beach, the Jersey Shore. And that was amazing change. And it was just absolutely what we needed, because after some months locked in apartments in New York City, all of a sudden we burst here. And because so many people are not at work and so many people are free to come to the beach scene was flourishing here, all starting from the beginning of May. Kiddies playing in the water in bunches, people walking without masks. The whole quarantine thing clearly here broke down very, very early. And just this relaxed, lifestyle, which sometimes you just completely forgot that there is a pandemic out there, except the restaurants were open only for takeout, and the shops were closed until recently, although they started opening at some point on the sidewalk. So closer to Memorial Day, local government, tried to take some measures. There's massive boardwalks on the Jersey Shore in the coastal towns. So on the boardwalk, there are benches for older people to sit. So the local town government, probably following the governor directives or whatever, put this yellow tape, don't sit on these benches, and all the benches before Memorial Day. That tape survived for about 2 weeks, after which probably somebody took, a decision to get rid of the tape. The tape caused enormous amount of vigilantism in otherwise quiet town, where people at night were coming and pulling all the tape, and in the day the tape was returning, and the older people were sitting on those benches with it. So, just silly stuff, but it was good. And so I've been here all this time until this past weekend when I showed again to New York City in the post-looting era. So I set out the looting and the breakdown of the law and order in our Midtown Manhattan area here in New Jersey. So I set it out here. Showed up only this weekend, and oh my God, that was absolutely something. It was like walking on the moon. Well, you've seen this, walking on the moon. Boarded, everything boarded. Even drugstores, which are open, the windows are all boarded. Well, those drugstores in my neighborhood, all drugstores were looted to bare walls, literally to bare walls. Then they were restocked, and the windows are all boarded, and there is like a little door you're opening, like in the Middle Ages, people, you open the door to walk into the drugstore. Inside, everything is fine. But the fact that they're boarded, everything is still boarded. Any glass is boarded. They probably expect the looters will be back. You know, Macy's, where all the windows were broken and looted, right now, they're boarded too, but on top of that plywood, there is nicely printed, you know, some sort of material with let's all be friends, little hearts, and hands of different color holding hands and everything.
You know, when do we see New York City that quiet? You know, a Sunday in the summer, and especially with 4th of July next weekend, that would maybe be a quieter time. And there were still people out, so it wasn't like a total ghost town, but still, you know, Times Square, what? You're standing there on the corner of 42nd Street, like in the heart of Times Square, and maybe 10 people per 15 minutes drift by. Groups of police everywhere, tons of police presence. I mean, like, you know, New Year's Eve, well, a little less than that presence, but nobody around. You know, it was just kind of, it was interesting, really interesting.
Yeah, it was very bizarre. And, you know, to pivot now to our theme of mental self-care, actually, one sad anecdote from where I am right now on the beach, 2 blocks from the beach in one of the coastal beach towns, very Victorian place. So in Victorian era here, they built a bunch of you know, boarding houses, the houses, basically bed and breakfast where people would come and stay. And right next to my house, there is this old Victorian hotel, small hotel, a 3-story old Victorian house chopped into a few small apartments. We had never had any incidents here involving, you know, police or something like that. Never, ever in all these years that we spent summers here on the beach, right? So in May, after we came, within 2 weeks, there were 5 massive police and ambulance visitations to this little house next door. There are only a few apartments, you know? So first was a suicide attempt, right? Next was a drug overdose, followed by probably heart failure or something like that. Next was a brawl, probably drugged or drunken brawl on the porch of that little house. You know, all different, you know, people living there. Finally, like some kind of big family violence. I'm not sure, between, you know, spouses. So and then another, I think, heart attack or something with screaming, and it's just nightmares. So these people who are normal, otherwise people living, you know, after so many months of quarantine, sitting locked down in front of TV, consuming, you know, unhealthy amounts of fear mongering over the media and everything, this is what is happening. So, and this is something that is just was very graphic. Right in front of you. Again, police arrives and all the ambulances and everything. Meanwhile, a lot of us are experiencing probably the same degree of stress that caused those people to break down in this really sad way. But this stress is quiet. Why do I feel sometimes panicked, sometimes just depressed, sometimes hectically working on something as if it's going to solve the world pandemic right now? a lot of people have different stress response, different type of response to stress. And sometimes the same person has different types of responses. So for instance, one response is typically described as a person mobilizes themselves. You know, this is mostly me, right? So when this thing happened and my family started losing income and everything, I was immediately mobilized. I need to do something about it. I will be working, instead of like 18 hours, I will be working 24 hours. I will do this and I will do that. I will make things work. This is certainly not exactly a very healthy response. I plunged into workaholism and just lost myself in work, right? Meanwhile, there is, and I experienced that too, another form of this stress response, which is a person just wants to forget everything and run away. Just forget. Don't tell me anything about anything. I am leaving. I don't want to. So, in other words, complete plunge into total escapism, right? And I have tinges of this too. Like, I don't want to hear from anyone. Just leave me alone, right? And apparently there is another thing which I don't think I have experienced, but I heard from friends and neighbors that they're experiencing this. It's just feeling completely the opposite of that, immobilized, right? And totally disconnected. Like, I would love to do something, but I just don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. And a person ends up sitting in basically deep, dark depression because there is the imperative of doing something, but there is complete inability to move yourself in any direction.
On our final week of work, we had our Zoom meeting, and they brought in stress management people to talk to do a presentation. This very nice woman. I think she works with children primarily.
Mm-hmm.
But I love one of the things, how she phrased it, because, with me, I feel myself in many, many ways to be in very good circumstance, very fortunate circumstance compared to other people. And that, combined with a very staunch Catholic upbringing, I feel like I'm not allowed to feel stress. I shouldn't feel stress. I don't deserve to feel anxiety when I'm in better shape than other people, but that's not how anxiety works. Like you said, we all have our triggers and our responses. And so even though, thank goodness, my immediate situation isn't bad, there's still plenty of stuff that's making me anxious. And that long-term unknown, it's that unknown that you can't make a plan, that what's going to happen in the fall? I don't know. There's literally no way I can really plan for that. And then there's just nothing you can hang on to. So what do you plan for? What do you do? What actions do you take? But starting with this articulation, because what I love what she said was, if you can name it, you can tame it. And the idea being, identify, step back, identify how you're feeling, define it. Don't just realize you're feeling something and take that little bit and define. I'm angry. I'm scared. I'm upset. I'm nervous. I'm hyper. I'm down. Because we got to start from that identification. And I think that's critical, is like, figure out what's scaring you. One of the biggest things for me, after kind of identifying and allowing yourself to be anxious and understanding it's totally natural and healthy, step away from the media. Step away. Mindless, continual consumption of this very, very repetitive material. I think very repetitive. There's a lot of screaming in media. It's just crazy, and I don't think it's helpful. The emotional coloration is so extreme. It's not helpful. It's not productive. If the information that you're consuming is not leading you perhaps to some form of enlightenment or some form of productivity, helping you grow, if all it's doing is making you anxious, then that's not helping you. Especially, I think it becomes a very repetitive cycle. So, we want to be alert, we want to be informed, we want to be aware. We need to be, for our safety, for the safety of others. But you don't need to be in front of a TV screen hours at a time, scrolling, clicking on all these things at Facebook. So to me, consume enough to be educated, consume thoughtfully. And I just right away realized this is no good. This is making me too anxious over things that I have no control over. So I set a time limit for one thing. Like, okay, I'm going to go on, and I'm not always great about it. What I really have to do is I set an alarm on my clock, on my phone rather, and put it away from me so that the alarm goes off. I have to step up to go shut off the alarm because I hate the sound.
Yeah.
But that will get me up. Okay, time's up. Click it off. Go deal with that. Don't click the clickbait. Consciously stop yourself. Look at that headline and think, you know what? Research is what I really was trained for in a lot of ways, back into even high school, but certainly in college. I look at this, I smell a rat, or I'm just like, this is too inflammatory, this headline. I don't feel this whole article is going to do anything other than inflame me to no good purpose. I'm not taking that bait. No, thank you. Now, there are people on social media, either personal friends of mine or maybe authors or figures that I follow. Now, their opinions I might trust. So if they say, here's a great book to read about this, here's a good film to see, hey, check this out. So a handful of people for whom I respect their opinions on certain topics, okay, then I might go and click that because I'm like, okay, if they say this is good, I'm going to check it out and see because that will help me grow. So that was very, very critical to me.
Yeah, you see, the whole the media, the pandemic got politicized extremely early in the history of this pandemic, right? So practically all the information that we receive is information from whoever took a particular side. It's impossible to get objective information, especially that we live in the era where media stopped existing outside of ideology. All media is ideologized right now. So the profession of the journalist disappeared. It's now the profession of ideologue on this or that side. So to offer your brains for constant washing is definitely not helpful. And
I like that. That's good.
and even though you see a screen here behind me, but I don't own TV. I mean, I own a house with bunches of TVs, but that's simply because I'm staying in a guest house next to our main house right now. And, for guests, there is a TV, but, like, honestly, I haven't turned this particular or any TVs around here since I came here in May. Not a single time. I crawl out on Twitter sometimes, where sometimes I fall prey to desire to do some vigilantism with friends, with my online vigilante friends who take sides. But even if you take sides for, a short period of time and engage in some discussion and even conversations, my principle is to get it out of my head, literally, the moment I close my laptop or phone. That's it. It has to be out of my head. And I try to get it out and keep my head clear for any potential information that will be coming from the opposite side as well, for any semblance of objectivity, because otherwise you end up existing in this echo chambers where it's the same. You're hearing the same thing if you're listening to the same people, to the same voices. It's just and I think in part, yes, that's what helps these people depressed. You know what it reminds me of? Obsessively watching the Weather Channel during like a big hurricane or something.
Yeah. Although I love the Weather Channel.
Is not going to change its course. The hurricane is not going. It's the same. It just goes in those circles, and
that's a good point.
Here, but a lot of people get addicted to hearing how many houses were, ruined, and people reporting, and there is damage here, and there are rumors there. Well, it's not going to change anything as long as you take care of yourself and your family. And same here, same thing too. In the end, you have to focus on yourself and your family.
Exactly. And you get caught up in that. It becomes a negative spiral, a constantly turning wheel of anxiety. And this again was one of the points that was brought up in our meeting, and something that I practiced this as well, but it was good to hear someone else say it, which was, define what's really bothering you. And then
that's huge.
Stop overthinking it. Stop the circular thinking and instead see, can you arrive at a solution, or if not a solution, a plan of action that's realistic. And that was a real point they made, is that we tend to, like a lot of media and news, it's going to the most negative, the most sensationalistic, but that's not always really very realistic. And to kind of dial yourself back and be like, okay, wait a minute. Realistically, once you identify what's really bothering you here, realistically, what's likely to happen? Like, is there another way to look at this? What's the, not like positive, negative, because that can be very emotionally colored. Oh, be more positive. Stop being so negative. No, because then you're also being a little bit judgmental about what another person's vibe is. You know, we don't know what's in their life. Yeah. But more like, okay, what is the realistic, what's a really realistic viewpoint here? What's a really realistic plan of action that you could take that will make you feel better, that might better protect you, protect your friends, protect your family, prepare you for something? And I mean, she didn't say this in our meeting, but what I know helps me, and I had to do this like 2 weeks ago, is go to that most Hollywood catastrophe, unrealistic, worst case scenario. Like, I have to go there, because that tends to be my low level of anxiety. I get that buzz that I'm not permitting myself to be anxious because I don't think I deserve it, because my life isn't that bad. But I had to go to where the buzz was and realize, you know what really was scaring me, among other things, but taking it to the worst point, was, okay, worst case scenario, New York City goes completely bankrupt. I lose my pension, which is the whole reason I have this job and have invested all these, you know, decades now into this. What do I do without that pension? What do I do? And that, like, is the scariest thing to me. But I confronted, you know, I stopped and I thought about it, and I thought, well, I could try this, I could try that. But, you know, eventually where it leads, as you know, all roads for me do not lead to Rome, they lead back home to Montana. And I call my dad, I'm like, Dad, okay, if the city goes bankrupt, I'll move him back in with you. He's like, okay. But as silly as that sounds, as ridiculous as that sounds, I had to stop and dwell on that and realize that scares me more than anything, as unrealistic as that might seem. If my pension goes, I got a problem. I got a real problem, because my whole life was geared to getting that pension. But there are other steps to take. So, okay, that's the extreme. But then also thinking, okay, well, that probably won't happen. What other things can I do? And investigate, are there other fields or other ways to prepare myself to take a different job if I had to? Now we're talking about big layoffs, potential really big layoffs in a couple of months here at the Department of Education. Right. Realistically, we usually go by seniority, so I probably wouldn't get cut. On the other hand, I'm not a classroom position. If we stay remote learning, you don't need me. If we get cut, what could I do to continue to earn money? What would be the odds? What better odds of getting a job here? And kind of thinking that through. Should I be training myself? And then also, frankly, just thinking about money. Like, you know what? Save all the money. So I'm kind of rambling about me, but that was my process of confront the worst case scenario head on. Hey, run home to Montana and farm the land. It's going to be a little house on the prairie, but that's what I have to do. That's what I do. But what other steps could I take? And another thing to do, another action, is simply to vent. You know, whoever your family and friends are, I'll pick up that phone and, you know, talk to my sister. Vent it out, because then you feel better when you sometimes put your fears and your anxieties, put them out in the air, articulate them, and you feel better.
Yeah, you know, my thinking, so that's how you started your thought process, right? I started my thought process by thinking, first of all, trying to understand the word that most people use about this is unprecedented, right? This is unprecedented times. We live in unprecedented pandemic, unprecedented disaster, and everything, right? Okay. However, it is precedented, because there were other disasters. There were wars, right? It was much worse. Like even the Second World War and the local wars, they're worse than what we're experiencing now. There were early 20th century saw similar pandemics like the Spanish flu and others, also worldwide. And of course, you know, there we go, medieval times and so on. So how did people survive the disasters that were even worse that we are experiencing right now? And thinking about it and sort of like trying to remember the drift of the reports of the survivors of all these disasters, right? I noticed that this drift goes always in the same direction, in the direction that people who are most successful at surviving, they take the focus away from their own persona and place it somewhere else. So the focus goes away. They're not focusing on, we talked before about self-pity, but it's not even this superficial, frothy thing of self-pity. That will be a very fast burnout. No, this is how you deal with real sense of lack of control, grief that is affecting a lot of people, social isolation, which is, all of these things, medical supervision, like lockdowns, social isolation, these things that can be innocent and helpful, can be weaponized, and people perceive them. Even if you believe that it was a good step by the government to lock you in your house, you still perceive it as violence into your own persona somewhere at some level, right? It's the same thing as being in a state of war and or surviving, I don't know, some disaster on an uninhabited island or something like this. So take, no matter how superficial or how deep this sense of disaster happening, right? You take it off your persona and move it somewhere else. So how? I made for myself a list. So first on my list, and I tried some of those things, and I also observed other people really going. So it may be a very short list. I think I have just 3 or 4. I need to look, because I actually wrote in my sticky notes on my laptop. Okay, okay. One thing I mentioned is escapism, right? And this is the simplest one. The one that I want maybe to talk a little bit and mention it is nature, escaping into nature, escaping into something that has nothing to do with even humanity at all, to something that God created, right? Nature. But some other things too. Okay, so I'll first mention what I came up with. So escape is number 1, right? Number 2 on my list was productivity. And this can be work, which is my case. I escape into workaholism really, really readily, fast. But it also can be escapism into creativity. And this, I think, is all these wonderful reports about people, the arts flourishing in people's homes during the quarantine, just because you have time on your hands and you want to use this time productively, creating beautiful things, reimagining your environment and whatnot. So this is number 2, productivity and productivity through creativity. 3, you already mentioned. The third thing I wrote to myself was monitoring information. So anytime when I feel, and also the solid assumption that all the information that comes toward me is biased, that it is ideologically underpinned, and I have to take it with extreme degree of care and critical thinking, right? So monitoring information, not focusing, like that weather channel, right? Not focusing on the same thing more than once. I heard this news, okay, I just said, oh my God, how terrible, can it really be? I will not go and watch another report about it. I will not go and watch 3 reports on different media outlets about it. No. One time, even if I heard from a person who is whose opinion I trust, that is enough. Thank you very much. I will not be going and watching TV or looking out information, seeking out information on the internet. Finally, the last one, I think, about which we should talk a little bit more, maybe even in a separate segment, is charity and acts of kindness. This is certainly the most powerful thing that takes your attention from your own griefs and troubles, and through helping others, relieves you of carrying this burden for yourself. So I don't know, there are probably other things that can be included in this list. This is literally what I came up with, trying to, once I noticed that I have this buzz, as you said, happening in my head.
Yeah. It's funny though, because mine is like exactly the same. Escapism,
You know what?
identifying
I,
healthy
I absolutely swear I haven't looked it up anywhere. I came up with myself.
well, yes, me too. Identifying healthy escapes, though, because
Mhm.
again, it comes down to the idea of we have to allow ourselves to be frightened and have some fears and need comfort sometimes. So, like eating junk food all day and doing nothing but watch movies all day, that's not really healthy. But I think sometimes we are allowed that. So once in a while to do something that is a habit would be very unhealthy, to just eat junk food all day. I think you're allowed that once in a while, especially during the stress of a pandemic and
Yeah,
the
give
related
yourself
stress that it
permission.
brings.
Give
But
yourself permission.
yes, exactly. Perfect. Give yourself permission to occasionally, yes, have an unhealthy escape, but then to try and have the healthy escapes, which I identify as productive outlets.
Mhm.
And productive could be cleaning a closet, scrubbing out the kitchen, uh, organizing old photos. I mean, something that's kind of been at the back of your mind. You go, you do it. It takes your mind off other things. And there's, to me, because I adore being productive, there is always a sense of feeling better when I do produce something. But also, if I can focus, just be in the moment, shut everything down, be in the moment of the task at hand, I find that very helpful. If it's an artistic task, then yes, so much the better. I mean, that can be wonderful. I have to be honest, when I am anxious, it is just incredibly hard for me to feel artistic. Like motivation, inspiration, I really have to kind of grind it out by just discipline. Like, okay, try and do this. Just try and come up with something. But it's hard. I'm not feeling a lot of free flowing artistic inspiration, but I really respect people that are. Again, we all deal with the stress differently.
Also the constraints of your situation and of time. I can't dance here. There is no studio environment. I literally can't play music loudly because my kid is homeschooled and he's sitting and doing his work every day, right, for hours. And then it's time to take him to the beach, and I can't work again, and I can't work again. So it's
But we
not
can't
like,
make ourselves feel guilty about that either. We're not required to produce
yeah,
masterpieces.
yeah, totally,
That,
totally.
that
One thing that really was helping me, as I said, and here on the beach, of course, it's natural. The nature is just walking along the ocean in the early hours when there is not many people there, because the beach scene here is insane. Thousands of people on the beach sitting on top of each other. Forget about masculinity. Nobody knows what it is here. It's a real intense beach scene. But apart from that, like finding those moments which are quiet, or sitting, and looking at the water, at the sunset.
yeah,
The
yeah.
cliches, but it's been so healing. This is just amazing, because this really takes my mind off anything. I don't judge when I look at humans, and right now when you're looking at a human, this human is either wearing a mask or not. This causes most of us to judge in this or that direction, because again, it's been so politicized that we are all most of us taking this or that side, right? So you need to go somewhere where there is like no human presence, looking at beasts and birds and sea creatures and water and beautiful, amazing flowers. And this is not even a natural environment where I am. I'm in an old Victorian town where every like square centimeter is covered with either a Victorian home or some flowers put there by an old lady who lives in that house. So if, for instance, you live somewhere close to real nature, like real fields, or like a creek in the woods.
If you have your own garden, look
Oh
at the
my
time and
God.
energy. Probably the most beautiful gardens, for for years in America are happening right now. People have really gone out into their gardens, and
Yeah.
I mean that would be a blessing. I wish I had that. But
Oh, totally. If you have anything like this, or if you have a garden, which I don't have, but I would love to, your problems are solved. Just take your eyes of human beings and put them on beautiful natural things. So this, in my list, this is still in the escapism, right? there are a couple other things that I indulge. You know, speaking about unhealthy indulgences, I started allowing myself eating ice cream. And you know, I don't like ice cream generally because I don't like anything sweet. I like things that are maybe savory or salty. Potato chips would be my downfall, right? But sugar improves your mood. You know, you notice it very, very easily. Alcoholic beverages, you know, which always thought I would kick the habit at some point, and I shouldn't be in those quantities. But again, right now, I kind of feel self-medication is helpful at the moment, and kicking the habit, I will just probably postpone it a little bit. And it's another sugar influx. Basically, it doesn't matter whether you eat ice cream or whether you have your, you know, skinny girl white wine with 100 calories per glass. Doesn't matter. It's all the same sugar. So anyway, another thing that I found is also escapist, but certainly much more productive than eating ice cream or drinking wine. Reading, right? This is
me too. That was on my list too.
Yeah, and you see, I don't have time to read on my own at all because I'm either cracking a whip on my homeschooled kid or rolling him to the beach and just, you know, sitting there staring into the distance, afraid to think any thoughts. But because you need to read to kids. So as a family, we are going now through Lord of the Rings. We are on the second book right now. So, and every night it's one thing where we all come together at the end of the day and read some pages from the Lord of the Rings, is submerging ourselves into a completely different world with no COVID-19 masks, quarantines, and any other, you know, disasters, police ambulances, looters, none of that. And in that world, we really live, and because we do it usually late at night, we go to sleep with that world.
Reading is really my favorite thing to do of all time since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And it's an opiate, total opiate. Yeah. And thanks God I live alone. I can read as much as I want. But that's where I have to balance it a little bit with the idea of unhealthy versus healthy. Mm-hmm. Because if to sit all day and just read, I'm not hurting anyone, but I'm not producing anything at all. But I have kind of been rolling with the idea that I'm bribing myself with it a little bit. Because frankly, I could be on my sofa an entire day and read 8 or 8 books. Yeah. But then I'm kind of getting them all, and that's why I love my Kindle, you know. I love BookBub that tells you what books are free or cheap. I'll get them, and they hook you. Because, you know, you get one book for free. Well, of course, that's book number 1 of like an 18-book series. And if you like book, well, now I need to find what happens, and now I need to find, so you start buying them. And I had a little fall down that rabbit hole, and I'm like, okay, fine, I need it today, relax myself today, can't keep doing this. Yeah. But right now I'm actually using that as a bribe because I'm using it to bribe myself to stick to my calorie counting. So if I stick on my calorie counting Monday through Friday, then like I'm allowing myself the next Monday, I can have a reading day and I can buy some books.
Brilliant.
And I'm seeing this is a brand new thing because it's hard sometimes to bribe yourself and not like.
You know what it reminds me? It's in reverse. With my son, if he can do enough reading, then he can have some calories and an ice cream.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The opposite. If you deprive yourself so much, then you can do reading. This is what happens to us when we grow up, people. Stay kids as long as you can.
Sometimes you fall down the rabbit hole, that's fine, especially in what is realistically a worldwide stress situation, which is right now. But we don't really want to be doing that 7 days a week. And we don't really probably want to be doing that even 4 or 5 days a week. You know, we want to find a balance. Yeah. And also just sometimes, you know, come up with a coping idea. Like when you really are freaking out, is there a replacement? Is there a thought? Is there an action you can take to break a negative cycle? And maybe it is, like you said, going outside into nature. Sometimes just stopping what you're doing, walk around the block. I mean, there is no nature by me. Ain't happening.
New York City.
Yeah, there's no nature here. And I don't even live in a particularly attractive neighborhood, but it's okay. walk a few blocks around. It's a very safe neighborhood, and there's always something going on. I can be looking at a shop, I can be observing traffic. It takes my mind out of myself, and sometimes just that little reset, just stop, go, reset, and then and while you're resetting, be thinking to yourself, this is not good. I feel myself going into a negative place. No, let me, when I get back inside that apartment, I'm going to read a book, and I'm just putting everything else to the side. Or no, when I get back, I want to be productive. I'm going to put on a happy movie. I'm going to put on a romantic, something that lifts my spirits, or at least distracts me, engages me, to take me beyond this little blip in my system here. I mean, there's no perfect solution. We got to all survive. None of us know what, we don't know what's going to happen, but survive as healthfully as we can.
Yeah. Well, I think we have probably covered a lot. I have a surprise. My neighbor who lives in this house, where the police comes and everything. So sometimes I just sit with him and with all the neighbors there on their porch talking. And I discovered that he is craving to have a painted rock. And he is very much into nature. He feeds squirrels all the time. So I told him I will paint him a rock with a squirrel. So wait a second, I'm going to show you. So here is the rock. He hasn't seen it yet. I'm going to present it to him today.
Oh, I love it. Oh my God, Nan is beautiful.
Yeah, so this is,
I asked him, gorgeous.
Do you want a picture? It took me like maybe a little bit, like 2/3 of a work day, I would say. So yeah, no, I can't do it regularly. This is just, this kind of detail is just for a friend as a gift.
It is fabulous.
I asked him, do you want a gray American squirrel or a red Euro squirrel? He wants a Euro squirrel, even though we have only gray American squirrels here. So anyway.
Oh my God, it's beautiful.
And on this note, Tanna and I will say goodbye, and we'll continue this conversation in a couple of days. All right, bye.